Welcome to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Microsoft, Starbucks, Coca-Cola, the latest major brands to pull advertising from Facebook. This amidst the Stop Hate for Profit campaign backed by the NAACP and the Anti-Defamation League, calling on major corporations to take a stand against Facebook's, quote, repeated failure to address hateful content on its platforms, including WhatsApp and Instagram. Shares of Facebook plunging 8% Friday as the campaign picked up speed. The stock opening dismally today, but then leveling out and ending the day actually up 2%. Unilever, Hershey's, Verizon have all halted ads on Facebook already. Joining me now to discuss, early Facebook investor and Elevation Partners co-founder and also the author of the book Zucked, Waking Up to the Facebook Catastrophe, Roger McNamee. Roger, I can't think of a better person to talk to about this today. This seems different. I don't recall any time that so many major brands all at once joined a boycott against Facebook on the grounds of civil rights. Would you say this is different as well? Oh, definitely. No, Emily, I think this is part and parcel of a massive change going on in our society. I mean, think of how different the world is today from 3 months ago. You know, first we have the pandemic, then we have the economic decline that came with it. And then since the murder of George Floyd, we have an awakening about issues of racism and civil rights that have, I believe, affected every part of the American economy and every part of our society. So why now? Well, again, I think that if you think about this from the perspective of an investor or from an advertiser, Facebook had a unique product. It gave the ability for the advertiser to reach audiences with a level of precision never previously available. And from an investor point of view, it provided fantastic returns. There was always a cost. I mean, the 2016 presidential election in the United States, the Brexit referendum in the United Kingdom, were the wake-up call that the platform could be misused. And undermining democracy was a conversation that we had in 2017 with you on this show. Into 2018, we have the Cambridge Analytica thing. Suddenly the scandal about privacy comes forward. Then the issues of white supremacy became much more pronounced in 2019 and into 2020. And now all of a sudden you layer onto this the pandemic, the economic decline, and then the murder of George Floyd. And suddenly the country is rethinking its priorities. And there's a very real chance that we're going to value things differently going forward than we have in the past. And that we'll be less focused on maximizing shareholder value and more focused on having an equitable distribution of benefits in the economy. You know, it's too early to know if that's going to happen or not. But I do believe that what is going on here is that advertisers are responding to their customers. Their customers are genuinely worried about police brutality. They're genuinely worried about the role that Facebook and other platforms have played in amplifying hate. And the result is this campaign has gained traction in barely more than a week, to the point where I believe it's 130 or more major advertisers have committed to joining the campaign. The stock declined 55.8 Roger,
billion
just in the last few
on
minutes,
Friday.
Just in the last few minutes, Chipotle joined the campaign when Unilever came out on Friday saying they were joining the campaign and ceasing advertising on Facebook for the year. We saw that major stock plunge. I mean, Facebook is such a behemoth. Often when these things happen as one-offs, the response is that it's not really going to make a serious dent in Facebook's advertising revenue. But do you think at this point this will make a serious dent in Facebook's ad revenue, and how big a dent?
So, Emily, the way I think about this is Facebook has literally millions of individual advertisers, and even the largest ones are substantially less than 1%. So it is unrealistic in the short run to expect an impact on revenue or earnings. But a $55.8 billion decline in market value, which is what you saw on Friday alone, that is equal to the entire market value of Twitter combined with Snap. And that's what Facebook lost in one day. And it's bounced a little bit today, but very little. And to me, that's what this is really about. This is really about starting a conversation and engaging in what is the proper role of a corporation in our national discourse. Should it be okay for a corporation to undermine democracy, undermine public health,
to undermine privacy for profit? Should it be okay to amplify hate? Should it be okay to amplify white supremacy or conspiracy theories for profit? And I think 3 months ago, people thought, what's the harm? No big deal. But today, where you can really see the harm in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, in the context of the murder of George Floyd, that people are reassessing all of that. And I don't know how that's going to turn out, but I think investors have to be part of that conversation. I think they have to ask themselves, what kind of a world do I want to live in? And, what are the consequences of making a little bit more money on Facebook relative to the cost to society?
Now, on that note, we did speak with Nick Clegg, the Vice President of Global Affairs, earlier on Bloomberg Television, and he answered this question about whether Facebook, is profiting off of hate. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Oh, let me be absolutely clear. We do not profit from hate. We have no incentive to have hate on our platform. We don't like it. Crucially, our users don't like it. Users, we know this from the surveys that we conduct with users, they don't like to see hateful, inflammatory content on their news feed. And of course, advertisers, they've made quite clear, don't like it either. It's not a question of whether one is for or against hate. Everybody is against hate. It is, what do you do about it?
Now, on top of that, Roger, you had Mark Zuckerberg on Friday announcing new initiatives at Facebook to funnel people to their voter information center. He also broadened the definition of what counts as hate in advertising. What do you make of Facebook's response here, whether it's Nick Clegg or Mark Zuckerberg?
Well, let me take Nick Clegg first. What he said is patently ridiculous. Here's the issue. He said in a conversation on Friday or over the weekend that Facebook represents the whole world, that it doesn't represent hate more than anything else. And it is true that the audience of Facebook, the users, are a cross-section of the whole population. But the business model of Facebook is about grabbing and manipulating our attention. And in order to do that, the most powerful tool they have is to provoke our emotions, so that algorithms will naturally amplify anything that provokes our emotions. So it turns out that hate speech, disinformation, and conspiracy theories are three of the most valuable types of content in Facebook's business model. And on top of that, they have a recommendation engine that encourages people to join Facebook groups on various topics. And their own studies have shown that 64% of the joins, 64% of the time that people join an extremist network, they do it because of a recommendation made by Facebook. So the Nick Clegg thing is just silly. We should not treat that as a serious response. And when Mark is talking about elections, he's trying to change the subject. And it is not at all obvious to me that Facebook can be a constructive force here. There's no question that they can manipulate people's emotions, but I think we have to question their judgment. They have shown time and again a willingness to side with one political party and one political candidate, as opposed to siding with democracy and fairness. And in my mind, that is not correct. That's not the American way. And we should not allow the 15-year apology tour that Mark Zuckerberg has been on since Facebook started to continue. We have to demand better. And candidly, asking them to fix themselves, I think, is unrealistic. This is going to require regulation. And it's going to require regulation in 4 areas. Safety. We're going to have to make changes to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act to reform their business model and change their incentives. We're going to have something like an FDA that approves all new technology products before they come to market for safety and efficacy. But we're also going to have to look at issues like privacy. We're going to have to protect people's privacy and reduce the surveillance on them. We're going to have to use antitrust to increase the competition in the marketplace. There are all of these initiatives that we have to do, and we have to do them all. You can't just do a little here and a little bit of there. This stuff is all one large problem. And these companies are so important to our economy that we have to find a way for them to coexist with our society without doing harm, where we get what's great about them without having to suffer the consequence of what's wrong.
So speaking of other major companies, I mean, there are a number of large companies that haven't said that they are going to pull their ads from Facebook. As I understand, Walmart is one of them. Procter & Gamble and GM have said they're reviewing it but haven't taken a stand yet. Either way, if these companies don't take a stand, does that mean they stand for hate? Does that impact their brands?
Absolutely. No, I think that this is a moment in time when, the United States of America is reassessing its values. And the corporations that are listening to their customers have joined this campaign. And I think we have to give people time. This has happened very, very rapidly. And the skills that served executives so well for the last 40 years are suddenly not very helpful. And, from my perspective, if Procter & Gamble and General Motors and others need a little bit more time, if they need to have conversations, that's fine. But we do need to come together. And I think there's a great opportunity for everyone watching the show to go to stophateforprofit.org, stophateforprofit.org, and sign up and express your point of view on this thing. And let's give the message to marketers that hate for profit that's not suitable in the United States in 2020 any longer. And we can do better. And candidly, Facebook can be the great company it can be without amplifying hate, without amplifying disinformation and conspiracy theories. There's just no place for that anymore.
Meantime, Roger, we're hearing from our sources that Facebook is planning a roundtable with advertisers tomorrow. Do you think at this point that this is a moment where we could see Zuck dramatically change his stance or reverse his stance, or now that he's made this decision and taken this particular stand?
I mean, Emily, I would hope that is true. But for 15 years, Facebook has apologized, promised to do better, and then gone back to business as usual. And I think the burden of proof is on them to demonstrate that this is different. I don't believe words matter. The underlying issue here relates to the business model, to the amplification of hate, disinformation, and conspiracy theories. And until they make the changes in the algorithms to prevent that stuff from spreading, from being amplified, it's just talk. And, until they get rid of the recommendation engines that drive people towards extremism, it's just talk. And, at this point, we can't take them seriously because, they believe that we'll get bored and move on and we'll forget this issue and they can go back to doing what they've always done. That has worked incredibly well for them for 15 years. It's our job to make sure that this time it ends.
Speaking about the broader environment, as we've been talking, we've gotten some news on China and Hong Kong. U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross has announced that Hong Kong's special status will be revoked. China has been taking steps to curtail Hong Kong's independence. That's rankled the U.S. government. You've got President Trump criticizing these moves. At the same time, he's facing, a health, economic, and social crisis in his own country, and there is a fair bit of irony there. Talk to us about the broader picture and how you see this playing out, given that, not only are we still fighting COVID-19, you've got cases resurging across the country, you've got tens of millions of people laid off, and now a reckoning over social justice in this country that all of these companies are now being faced to deal with all at once.
Yeah. So, Emily, as an investor, I stick to the things that I really understand, and a few things stand out. An enormous amount of our growth over the last 40 years has come from globalization, from doing trade around the world, from converting countries that used to be rivals or enemies into business partners. And China was first and foremost among them. And under President Trump, we have moved back towards a nationalist approach, away from all of the multilateral international relationships. And if you overlay the COVID-19 pandemic, our response has been so horrible. The rate of infection in this country is a quarter of the world's total, even though we're only 5% of the world's population. I mean, the result is we may be like a plague ship. Countries may not be willing to let us visit them, may not be willing to let us have as much trade. And all of that is really bad. And at the same time, President Trump's trying to get reelected. And we've now got two pieces of news in the last week. First, that he was willing to essentially do whatever China wanted, whether it related to civil rights repression of the Uyghurs, whether it's related to Hong Kong, in order to get China's support for his reelection. And then we've got the story about the Russians in Afghanistan paying bounties for killing American soldiers, which apparently he knew about and did nothing about. And all of that, it strikes me, puts us in this, as investors and as citizens, in this horrible position where, the president of the United States is operating in a way that, as far as I know, no president's ever operated before. And I don't know how we get through this without a reckoning. And I don't know what that looks like. And to me, it's deeply troubling. And as an investor, it makes me very, very cautious because, there's not only no V-shaped recovery going on here, we're coming into the worst days of the first wave of the pandemic. And, it's only June.
It's scary, and maybe we are seeing that reckoning happen now. Roger McNamee, we could go on for hours. Always love getting your thoughts here on the show. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Emily, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Roger.
Always a pleasure. Please stay well. Take care.
All right. All right. Thanks. You too. All right. Coming up, Americans flocking to plant-based meat as the lockdown and beef and pork supplies run low. Impossible Foods is seizing the moment. We're going to hear from the company's CFO next. This is Bloomberg. As the COVID-19 pandemic roils meat supply chains around the world, Impossible Foods is now making its sausage available to restaurants nationwide, ratcheting up competition with Beyond Meat. The pre-cooked plant-based sausage was already sold at over 20,000 locations, including Starbucks and Burger King. For more on their expansion, we're joined by the company's CFO, David Lee. So, David, I want to get to the sausage, but I just want to start with overall. What are you seeing in the supply chain as the virus resurges around the world? Has that impacted any availability issues on your end?
Well, at Impossible Foods, we have the benefit of bypassing so much of the supply chain that viewers are reading about being challenged, being compromised. We don't grow animals, transport them, or slaughter them. We don't process them in an environment like in plants that you're seeing where the animal industry is really struggling. So we really have the benefit of skipping the animal altogether. And so what we've seen actually is no disruption to date in our supply chain and a very large increase in demand, both direct to consumer and in retail, but as well a resurgence in our business and food service with restaurant partners.
So talk to us about this new product and what it means in terms of your servicing and meeting that new demand based on some of these new trends and new concerns, quite frankly, among your customers.
Well, Impossible Sausage made from plants is really our first new product platform since we launched the Impossible Burger. And for it to be available nationwide, as well as with two great partners, Starbucks at nearly 15,000 plus locations here in the U.S., and as well Burger King as the Impossible Crisp Sandwich, is I think a testament that meat eaters are ready for products that aren't as challenging for the environment or their health. We're very excited, not just to partner with our larger customers, but we're partnering with 30 of the best comfort food diners across the United States to prove that this product, the Impossible Sausage, is for everybody.
Meantime, some of the companies that you're partnering with, companies like Starbucks, who are taking a stand right now against Facebook, in the name of civil rights and pulling advertising. Talk to us about how you're thinking about that as a brand, addressing this current social crisis, at such a critical time.
Absolutely. Impossible Foods, we've always relied overwhelmingly on earned media and word of mouth. We've built this brand based on the authentic advocacy of superfans. In fact, we really have not experimented very much at all with any form of paid advertising, including what you're talking about on social media. Now, our motivation was to build our brand, maximizing the impact of our investors' money by doing it with authentic advocacy at a low cost. But we do respect and applaud some of our biggest customers, like Starbucks. We're trying to send a message about hate speech by pulling their social media spend.
Well, we'll watch to see how you continue to address this. Impossible Foods CFO David Lee, thank you so much for joining us. Speaking about that Facebook story, my colleague Caroline Hyde earlier spoke to Nick Clegg, the Vice President of Global Affairs at Facebook. Let's take a listen to more of what he had to say.
Oh, no, I don't. I think with success comes responsibility, and with success comes accountability. And I think it's right that Facebook, given that though it's a private company, in many ways, we provide the platform on which so much societal and public debate and political debate now plays out. And of course, that is especially true in the highly polarized and fraught environment in which a lot of these debates are now playing out in the United States in an election year. And of course, we're acutely aware that this is a time of great sensitivity. Emotions are running very, very high, rightly, in the United States after the killing of George Floyd. And of course, we are constantly scouring our platforms to make sure that there is legitimate public debate. Yes, that people say things that maybe others don't want to hear, but we believe in free expression, but we do that within certain limits, and we have clear policies, and we seek to make sure that those limits are properly safeguarded. But I don't know, I'm certainly not complaining that there should be a particular focus on Facebook, because we do play a particularly important role in those public debates. The only thing I hope want to sort of point out fairly enough is that we're never going to eliminate all hate speech. Hateful individuals saying hateful things to each other has been around since the dawn of time, and every form of communication technology, email, telephone, now social media, are used by a minority of people to utter a minority of hateful things. It is our job to go after that content, but I don't want anyone to imagine that we can rid the world of hateful speech, because that is part of the human condition. Our job is to make sure it's minimized as much as we can minimize it, but I don't want to pretend that we can eliminate it altogether.
What about the criticism that some feel that this content, particularly inflammatory content, glorifying violence, division, disinformation, in some way leads to more eyeballs, and therefore in some way leads to a bigger bottom line, a greater revenue for Facebook? Is there a worry, and how do you tackle that criticism that you're not doing enough because basically it helps generate revenue for you?
Oh, let me be absolutely clear. We do not profit from hate. We have no incentive to have hate on our platform. We don't like it. Crucially, our users don't like it. Users, we know this from the surveys that we conduct with users, they don't like to see hateful, inflammatory content on their news feed. And of course, advertisers, as they've made quite clear, don't like it either. It's not a question of whether one is for or against hate. Everybody is against hate. It is, what do you do about it? We do not benefit from hate. We benefit from positive human connection.
Facebook's Nick Clegg there. All right, coming up, she's helping millions of Americans who've been laid off in the midst of the pandemic return to potentially even higher paying roles. We're going to talk to the co-founder and CEO of Guild Education, Rachel Carlson, next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, taking a look now at Lululemon shares, which are up in after-hours trading as the company announced it is pushing further into the in-home fitness market by intending to acquire Mirror. The interactive workout platform features live and on-demand classes, and the deal is worth $500 million. Meantime, a wide swath of the U.S. workforce is now out of work due to the COVID-19 pandemic. One company that's trying to help them is the ed tech startup Guild Education, a company that's helping to retrain and upskill workers who've been laid off. Earlier today, I spoke with Guild Education co-founder Rachel Carlson.
You know, we have the opportunity to see the devastation of the healthcare crisis and the economic crisis day to day with our own students. You know, it's safe to say the frontline workforce in America has been meaningfully, disproportionately impacted by this crisis, right? The majority of the layoffs have happened amongst workers who made less than $20 an hour. It's disproportionately impacted communities of color. It's disproportionately impacted rural communities. The devastation is bigger than you read in the front page of the newspaper every day when you look at it by subgroups and sub-demographics. And so we've been thinking really hard about how do we help our own students who are in school today, and how do we help laid off workers who need to now go back to school, get training so they can move into a different job.
So how do you help them?
Yeah, so, you know, historically, Guild has worked with companies to offer education to their existing workforce. What we did and had been planning over the course of 2019, but accelerated in February and March, was we launched a product that helps workers who've been displaced or laid off or furloughed to go back to school and figure out how to help them not only with the career services and the job placement, but help them understand how they might map competencies from their current job, like as a cashier or in a restaurant, or, you know, some of the hospitality trades that have lost a lot of work, and translate those maybe into a healthcare role where bedside manner is actually really similar to customer support, or, you know, that customer service experience, but you have to translate it into jobs of the future.
What are the jobs of the future? Where do you think the jobs are going to be?
That's a great question. I think they are going to sit in the 3 Ps, right? You've got people management, project management, and process management. And our computers and our AI aren't great at any of those 3 things. And so the work that, whether you're managing a person in a management capacity or you're helping a person in a bedside manner or a customer support capacity, those are jobs we don't want our technology to do. We want humans to do. Technology can support them, but we still want humans doing that work. And so those are the 3 areas, and you see those in sectors, obviously in technology, but also on a wide range of our historically traditional sectors. It's just the work is gonna look different because we're gonna be working alongside technology.
So you work with companies ranging from Disney to Walmart. Disney obviously struggling with theme parks in the middle of a pandemic. Walmart has been going gangbusters, especially because of, you know, the flood to shopping online. What trends are you seeing from the 2 different employers like that in 2 different situations?
Those are 2 great examples because it's a tale of 2 companies, right? So Disney made the incredibly difficult but brave decision to say, we're still going to support our employees during this furlough period with their education benefits. So they've actually leaned into that and are allowing their employees to use this time to upskill and reskill and advance their education. You know, on Walmart's side, it's in some ways business as usual for us, where they're still encouraging all of their employees to explore education as a tool for upskilling and reskilling, as well as they're continuing to hire, which makes them somewhat unique in this economic climate.
So who is hiring and what kind of jobs are they hiring for?
We've been a little surprised by that, because when we launched this next chapter product, which was for displaced workers, we went out and tried to figure out who's still hiring. And we actually got a lot more response than we anticipated. So the sectors that are still hiring are those which were able to be functioning online or in essential services. So obviously the big boxes, but also lots of companies that serve a customer online, whether that's, you know, the new online bank teller or the new online customer support, or some of those services that just used to happen face-to-face and are now going to happen behind a computer.
Now, what about the jobs that have been lost? You know, when we look up, and we're still in a period of uncertainty, employers don't even know what to plan for because we don't know what lies ahead. What jobs are going to be gone?
Yeah, you know, everyone keeps talking about a V recession or a U. That seems to be the hot debate. I think we're going to have a W. because I think we have this first dip of jobs that were lost due to either the economic or healthcare crisis. I think we're going to see them come back up at some periods, or maybe we just saw that in May. And then I think there's a second dip to come that's tied to the automation agenda, which companies have been planning for many years and said that they would implement or would likely happen during the next recession. That's what everyone said in 18 and 19. So I'm anticipating a W, and I think those jobs are going to continue to be disproportionately impacted on our frontline workers, which means we need to dig in to reskilling and upskilling for jobs of the future for that entire population.
Now, I know early on in the pandemic, you took that no layoffs pledge, which Mark Benioff and Salesforce put out there. That was for 3 months, as I understand it. Now that this is lasting significantly longer, can you still do no layoffs? Is that still the commitment?
Yeah, Guild's been in the fortunate position to be able to continue growing. So we are still hiring, and we do not anticipate laying off our workers. But we are super empathetic to the position that some of our partner companies are in, where they had to do furloughs and layoffs. And so we're feeling secure ourselves and trying to figure out how to be empathetic and partner oriented to companies that do have to anticipate layoffs in the months to come.
So what's your expectation for this jobs day? Every week we get a new report. Sometimes it's slightly better than we think, but generally, we're looking at historically low levels of unemployment.
Yeah, I think it's going to continue to look bad, and I think we can't judge it simply by how it impacts the stock market. I'm moderately frustrated that the analysis is simply how does this impact the way we trade stocks, and instead, I think the analysis should be how does this impact families? How does this impact communities? And I think clicking into that data and really looking at the disproportionate impact that these layoffs are having in certain communities is crucial and a missed part of the conversation at some level right now.
What are you seeing in those communities? How is this affecting them?
Yeah, we're seeing, our students who have family members experiencing layoffs or who themselves are in furlough or worried about that. They're in a really tough situation because they understand they both need to figure out how to not just move into another low-wage job. They want to move into a higher-wage job, but that takes training and time. And they have economic insecurity right now that they need to address for their family. And so what we're trying our best to do is dual track those conversations. How do we help provide for economic security now while helping you reskill and upskill? And that makes us really requires the world to move away from you've learned something, so you're done, off to the workforce, to a lifelong learning conversation. And that's something we've all been trying for the last decade, but we're really having it in an urgent way now that we have to help people move up in their skills and move up in their career at the same time.
Now, how concerned are you about the virus resurging in different parts of the country, different parts of the world, and could that impact the W that you foresee? Could it just be could that trough be really low for a long time?
I think that's exactly what we're all fearful of, right? We're all watching it carefully. I don't have the crystal ball, but I share the concern. And, from our vantage point, just trying to figure out how we can be supportive of folks who are impacted by that, regardless of how long the trough is, and hoping and praying we come out of it sooner.
Rachel Carlson there, CEO and co-founder of Guild Education. Coming up, as the U.S. continues to face a reckoning on social justice, plus President Trump suspending H-1B visas, what does that mean for the tech sector and employees here? We're going to talk to Carla Monterosso, CEO of Code 2040, next. This is Bloomberg. At a time when the United States is facing a reckoning over social justice and civil rights, and companies are talking about how to improve diversity and inclusion in their workplaces, President Trump temporarily suspended new work visas and barred hundreds of thousands of foreigners from seeking employment in the United States. This as major brands are taking a stand against Facebook. To discuss what it all means for big tech, we're joined by Carla Monterosso, CEO of Code 2040. Carla, thank you so much for joining us. Code 2040 has been working for years to help improve employment opportunities for the Black and Brown communities and surface some of this amazing talent that hadn't been making it to Silicon Valley. So curious, as a person who runs this organization, how you've been experiencing the last few weeks as the momentum behind the Black Lives Movement has picked up, and now you're seeing all of these major brands taking a stand against Facebook for how they handle hate and address minority communities on their platform?
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of twofold, right? Like one, there's a lot of excitement, or threefold. Like one, there's a lot of excitement around seeing this pick up again and seeing forward movement. And with that, just tremendous gratitude for all the Black Lives Matter activists that are out in local communities making this and the pain of Black communities, but also Black and Latinx communities, something that people cannot ignore, right? And so I feel tremendous gratitude for that. And I think there's a lot of grief also, like understanding the level of pain and death we had to see on our TV screens in order for this to get the attention that it is getting right now. And the third, I would say, is like a little bit of a feeling of Groundhog's Day, right? This is, while this is more national in scope, a lot of the way that the tech industry in particular is operating is reminiscent of what happened in 2014 when Google released its data. And there was a lot of forward momentum around this that honestly just capsized when the new administration came in and everyone went into their corners hiding from a president with an itchy Twitter finger.
I love that word, capsize. That so perfectly encapsulates what has happened. Then there was the Me Too movement and a sort of reckoning then around gender. You know, if you think it's Groundhog Day, do you believe then that we are going to drift back to the way things were once these conversations sort of peter out? Or do you feel like now is the beginning of a moment when we'll start to see real change?
Yeah. In the organization, we have an organizational value around multiple truths, and I find it very important in moments like this. I think it is absolutely possible that things go back to the way they were, right? And because of that, I just want to keep encouraging the consistent pressure that our communities are putting on companies to really look at what we have been saying for the last God only knows how many years. I have seen much more change in the last 2 to 3 weeks than I think I've seen in, I don't know, at least 10 years. And that to me seems very promising. And moving from what is and what has been like some important but ultimately cosmetic moves to structural changes within companies that mean we never even get to this place again is going to take a lot of work and a lot of pressure to keep the momentum going.
That might be the most hopeful thing I've heard yet, and I am more optimistic now that you I hear that you are more optimistic. Facebook is a huge employer, and I know a lot of Code 2040 folks end up working at Facebook. And you know, at this time, where you know Mark Zuckerberg has taken the stand that he has taken in terms of how to moderate speech and not moderate political speech, you know, what's your take on that? Can you separate the two or not?
No. I do not believe you can separate the two. You create the conditions under which people show up to work every single day. And if endangering Black life, endangering like immigrant life, endangering like women is something that you are comfortable with being on your platform, it is not a very tough extension for that to be what happens internally in your company, right? And I think I've heard from many people about how difficult it is to show up for that, right? And I think you're starting to see a lot of workforces push back on that as well, right? Like we've seen a lot of, whether it is Facebook or Google, and I just want to be clear that like Zuckerberg is one of the more dangerous examples, but is far from a singular example of a company in the Valley that allows that kind of discrimination to metastasize within its doors. And a global digital marketplace.
Right. Now, in another development, President Trump has temporarily halted new worker visas, and obviously the immigrant community is a huge asset in Silicon Valley. So many companies here rely rely on immigrant workers. How big a deal is this?
It's a really big deal. I think to be clear, the administration's only guiding policy is white hegemony. Like, that's it, right? And that leaves us as a country less competitive in a globalized world. Currently, there are 700,000 open tech jobs in the country. We only graduate 56,000 people with computer science degrees each year and 24,000 people out of boot camps. Even when you add the 65,000 people that are, or the 85,000 people that are coming in with H-1Bs, that's still just 165,000 workers, right? And every time you do not have people to fill open roles, the work that you're doing is slower. So the amount of work that you could open up for more people is slower, right? And America needs national labor policy that helps us, right? There are currently 34 million boomers who are retired and 10,000 of them retiring every single day. The last boomers will retire, will be 65 in 2030. Like, we don't have a single unified strategy for how we are going to operate around this. And the same people that are counter H-1B visa are counter a diversified workforce, right? And we have to really live with that.
Right. Carla Monterosso, CEO of Code 2040. Carla, thank you so much for stopping by and sharing your thoughts with us. We'll be right back with more of Bloomberg Technology after this quick break. The momentum behind the boycott Facebook movement continues to grow, with more high-profile advertisers pulling out, Starbucks and Coca-Cola, just to name a few. Recently, I spoke with Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey, whose office has been investigating Facebook, and got her thoughts on how the platform is handling political speech. Take a listen.
Well, I think it's irresponsible. I think they have completely looked away from this, and they have for a long time. And I will continue to call upon Facebook to exercise the true power it has in dominating the platform, which really is such a common mode of communication and so much more in today's global world. They need to step up. We've got another election coming. There are things that they can do to both better protect consumers and also the public. And you know, I just call upon Mark Zuckerberg and his executive team to take the action that many of us AGs have been demanding.
You know, as you mentioned, there are a number of different attorneys generals looking at Facebook along with the federal government. Do you think Facebook needs to be broken up?
Well, I think that it deserves a hard look. All of these major platforms, when you look at the extent to which they really control so much of the economy, so much of our discourse, they have tremendous power in their ability to aggregate our personal information and data. And so I think they need real close watching and a regulatory regime that protects the public and protects the market as well. And so, you know, I think that is really important. Our investigations will continue, but we certainly don't want a situation where one company has become so powerful that it does harm to our markets and does harm to public interest.
Would you say the same about Apple, Amazon, Google?
I would. I think that there are a category of companies that really many have talked about, and certainly some in Congress have talked about, deserve that hard look. And I know that for me, as a state attorney general, interested in antitrust issues, interested in protecting consumers, interested in protecting privacy, we're going to continue to push for this.
Meantime, you have the president signing this executive order aimed at social media companies, calling for laws to be reconsidered that give them protection from content that their users post. So you do have, you know, these big tech companies taking fire from sort of both sides of the aisle. And I wonder if in some weird way this is an issue that two different political parties could align on.
Well, I hope so. I hope parties could align on protecting people's personal information and their data, protecting consumers, and protecting the marketplace. I hope that that's something that both Democrats and Republicans can come together on. It should be.
But the executive order may not be aimed at that.
Well, we have a president who has pushed for any number of things that are actually not helpful or constructive. And I think that's another example. He may be looking for continued protection from platform and others with respect to the kind of campaign ads he wants to run and the information that he wants to see out there. But, we have to operate with an eye towards, the whole picture here and not be distracted by whatever Donald Trump does.
Twitter has stopped taking political advertising. Do you think Facebook should stop taking political advertising as well?
Many candidates, and I certainly have been one, have used Facebook as a way to do political advertising. To me, it's a question of what kind of political advertising, what kind of information are you actually putting out there? Because we see some ads that are just absolute blatant lies where they've manipulated videos, manipulated content, manipulated speech. And that to me, first off, it does no service to democracy. And in the commercial sphere, if you lie when you're advertising, I'll go after you for violation of our consumer protection law. And I think that the same should hold true when it comes to advertising for political speech. There is a line.
As we move into a critical election, are you concerned that the election could be undermined given the policies that companies like Facebook have adopted?
I am very concerned about the election for a couple of reasons. First of all of the deficiencies and liabilities that were exposed in 2016 in terms of how data and platforms could be misused and manipulated, I don't believe that those have been addressed. We also have a situation where it's going to be difficult for people to physically go to polling locations and vote. And we're working hard here in Massachusetts to pass a law to allow voting by mail. I think that's something that should be happening everywhere in this country because we don't want to see a situation where people have to choose between voting and their own health. And so that's going to happen. I also worry about continued suppression of the vote, the closing of polling places, the purging of the rolls. Many of my colleagues and I have taken certain states to task to hold them accountable for decisions that are really meant to deny people access to the vote and suppress the vote. And that is terrible for democracy.
You're at a system that's not. Maura Healey there, Massachusetts Attorney General. And be sure to catch our special program, Bloomberg Technology Boston, The Road to Recovery, Friday, July 3rd, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Bloomberg Television. And join Bloomberg for our annual broadcast of the Boston Pops Fireworks Spectacular. That's 8 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Television, Radio, and .com. That's it for me. This is Bloomberg.